Alrighty, folks. So here we are. We just heard the Love Note story, which may or may not have been based on a true story. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to use the Love Note as an example to identify what we call observations and inferences. So observations we've been talking about, all semester, right? Evidence is something that's observable, measurable, and anything that's observable is anything using our five senses, right? Taste, touch, feel, all the other ones. And so we're going to try to identify some examples of observations in the Love Note. But first, we should define what an observation is. An inference is something that we do when we make observations. An inference is when we form a conclusion or we form some sort of explanation out of stuff that we've witnessed. Our brain is constantly bombarded with observations, right? We're constantly seeing things, hearing things, feeling things, touching things, blah, 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 all those things. And our brain has to make sense of it. So it makes really quick assessments of what's happening and then judgments. And so an inference is basically a quick, almost like a jump to a conclusion type of thing, where you're making an assumption based on limited evidence. I did the wrong thing there. We're going to try this again. And so observation, information gathered using your five senses. Inferences is a conclusion, right? We've been talking a lot about reasoning. Reasoning is is similar to inferences. A reasoning is when you explain the evidence. Well, an inference is like a conclusion, right? You're or a claim, right? In a CER, claim, evidence, reasoning, your claim is based on evidence, right? The difference with what we're doing here between an inference and a conclusion, an inference is, it's basically a conclusion that you're making, but it's based on very limited evidence, right? In the case of the Love Note scenario, right? The biggest inference that most of us would probably make is that the Love Note was being passed around by those kids and that they were laughing at the Love Note. That's an inference because we don't know that for a fact. We don't have enough evidence to make a scientific claim. All we can do right now is make an inference. All right. So inferences are kind of like a conclusion. They're a quick jump to a conclusions type of thing. Another word for it would be an assumption, right? And we all know what assumptions do. All right. Maybe you don't. We'll explain it another time, just not in a video. And so we're going to go back to this. And so as an example to identify observations and inferences here. So here we have this hilarious comic strip where we have we're being proposed to believe that this is a science teacher and he is on playground duty. All right. And so the quick observation that we would make is that this adult, who presumably is a science teacher, is holding the child sideways, right? Like that's not how you're supposed to hold a kid in a swing, from what I understand. And so that's the observation. The inference is that, oh, it's a science teacher. So science teachers, they like to do scientific experiments and demonstrations and examples. So the inference is that we are assuming that the teacher is going to be recreating what's called Newton's cradle, which is being cleverly demonstrated here with this animation that I just stole off the internet. And that's Newton's cradle. So obviously, this is an inference. We don't know for a fact if that's what that particular person was going to do. Right? If he was, a good science teacher, he would know that humans are too mushy to really demonstrate the conservation of momentum, which is what Newton's cradle is actually doing. But that's okay. That's neither here nor there. It's a good example of an observation versus an inference. We observed the teacher holding the student in the wrong way on a swing set. The assumption is that they were going to demonstrate a scientific experiment. So there you go. There's our practice round. So back to the love note now. So what would be some things that we would look for in the love note, right? So anytime you're referencing any of the five senses, right? You saw something, you heard something, right? Those are observations, right? And so, right, any reference to those, obviously anything where this didn't occur in the love note, but if you're making any sort of measurements, if you're recording that kind of stuff, any sort of measurements are just ways that we record our observations. If we're using tools like a telescope or a microscope, those just enhance our ability to observe. All right, so all of those would be examples of observations. All right, and so in the love note scenario, a couple examples of observations. They saw them. This particular student saw them clustered. He heard them laughing, right? Heard them suddenly get quiet, and he heard the bell and blah, blah, blah. So all of these things are observations because he can hear them and see them and all that good stuff. Now, inferences, right? One of the ways to look for inferences is when you're trying to explain something. You're forming a conclusion, and in a conclusion, you're explaining something. So if you hear things like I think or probably or suggests or maybe, and anything that leads into an explanation like that is going to be making an inference. Okay. And so some examples of inferences in the love note scenario, right? The very most important one is that they were passing the love note, right? That's the biggest inference we can make. We assume that it was the love note, but we don't know that for sure because we cannot see the love note and we do not know what they're looking at. They were laughing at him. That's the assumption. We don't know if they were laughing at him. Yes, they looked at him and they laughed at the same time. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are looking at him and laughing at him, right? So a lot of assumptions there. So that's what I'm trying to get you to think about there. Okay. So now we're going to move on to step 3 here. Step 3 is you were going to read Cosmic Times. This is an article from 1955, so it's up to date, right? Anyways, you're going to read this article, and this is a great example of the process of science. In 1955, the formation of the universe was hotly debated. All right, there was a lot of passion involved, and a lot of anger, and a lot of good science too. And so we're going to kind of recreate this process of how we came to the understanding of how our formation of the universe occurred, right? So what I want you guys to do when you read this is I want you to read through the article. I don't want you to talk to the text like we've done in the past. You can. I'm not looking for that as a grade right now. What I want you to do is I want you to read the article, and I want you to identify any observations that are being made and any inferences that are being made. And I want you to identify them by either highlighting or circling them in different colors. So for example, here is just a little snippet of the Cosmic Times, and I've given a couple examples here, 2 of each, where observations are highlighted in purple and inferences are highlighted in green. And then I underlined the words that kind of gave it away for me, like how I knew it was an observation or how I knew it was an inference. So you can see in that the first purple example, it says the case for an ageless steady state universe was presented. It was presented, meaning it was shown off, right? Something that we can see. And so that's an observation. The first green one there, it says the steady state theory says, right? The word says is leading you to an explanation. All right. And then the second one there, it says claims, right? Claims is leading you to an explanation. And then on the very bottom there, it says surveyed, right? Surveyed means observed. All right, folks, there you have it. I want you to continue reading the Cosmic Times article. Highlight all of the observations and inferences in different colors. Make a key. And thank you for everything. I will see you soon. Still seeing you.